But I also wonder, this is what I wonder. I wonder if people like him and I get older, like we prefer to think of it that way. I prefer to think of it as the old age of youth because I'm still young and spry, right? So is it that, or is it truly changing?
Well, I think two things are happening. One is there are advancements in medical technology and increases in lifespan such that there are a lot of people who are listening to this podcast who are likely to live to the age of 100. Like, hopefully both of us included. It is true that in aggregate, average life expectancy in the United States is actually decreasing, which is horrible, but true. But it's also true that life expectancy outcomes are increasingly K-shaped. And while in aggregate, overall life expectancy is decreasing, largely due to the obesity epidemic, as well as fentanyl and other causes of early mortality, K-shaped life expectancy distributions means that there is a percentage of the population that will live substantially longer than Betty White did, who died at 99.
Yeah, it's a disturbing statistic, isn't it?
Right. Well,
the disturbing piece is the difference between the haves and the have-nots.
Correct.
I look at the research from Ken Dykewald, Gail Sehy. If you go back and look at those numbers, you know, people born maybe 15 years ago that will live to be 130 years old. Mm-hmm. And those numbers aren't being disproven anytime soon. But even the more recent research that for a segment of the population, it's way cheaper to eat in the center of the grocery store than it is around the edge of the grocery store.
Right.
And for that reason, we have to fill ourselves with things that are decreasing the life expectancy. And I find that highly disturbing. But for a portion of the population, if you're lucky enough to be able to eat around the edge of the grocery store, the healthier foods, then
the perimeter, yeah.
Then you really need to deal with the biggest problem in financial planning land, which is longevity.
Exactly. There are going to be some wild retirement planning implications around.
Tim could have 100 years to go.
Exactly. And so that, to your point, is why 50 is the new 40 and 60 is the new 50, right? That is why among people who are healthy as they enter their 50s and their 60s, 50 is still youthful. 50 may be the old age of youth, but 50 is still youth. And 60 is, the youth of old age, right? Because people in their 60s are running marathons. That didn't used to happen, not in the numbers that it does today. People in their 60s are running marathons and they're deadlifting and they're squatting and they're benching.
You want to hear something really cool? I take part in a local nonprofit. I love doing things in my hometown because I work online with people across the world every day. So it's really fun to get involved. And I'm part of this trail building effort called Partnership for the Pathway in Texarkana. Well, our biggest event, Paula, is a half marathon that we put on. We had the half marathon as we record this just a couple of weeks ago. A gentleman, I'm just going to call him out because he's a badass. Frank Bright ran our half marathon this year, won the 60 and over division, and he's 80, Paula. He's 80 years old and he won the 60 and older division. That's Frank amazing. Bright from Shreveport, Louisiana, you are a badass. And by the way, just getting to meet this guy and everybody who knows him, he is not what we used to think about 20 years ago as an 80-year-old. He's a vibrant, he doesn't look 80. He doesn't act what you think of as, quote, 80. This guy's out there doing stuff, taking part in the community. He's running half marathons. It's crazy. I love that. So exactly what you're talking about, Frank embodies, and we're seeing more Franks show up all over the world.
I couldn't even run a half marathon.
My favorite text.
I can't even run a 5K.
My favorite text from you was when you had to run like 2 blocks and you're like, this is awful.
Worst 2 blocks of my life.
You're like, this is what you do for fun? What kind of sicko are you, Joe? I could hear you calling me names as you're running, like to get to the microphone on time. That was the best text ever. I should have kept it.
At any rate. So, Tim, you are not starting late. And to everyone else who's listening, who's in their 20s or even your 30s, start now, of course. Start investing for retirement today. But don't kick yourself about not having started prior to today, because in your 20s and even in your 30s, you are still very, very young.
Instead of bemoaning the fact that you didn't start earlier, which is where that comes from, I go back to Dr. Ellen Langley. It's a useless emotion. Make the best out of what you did. And what you did was you called up the Afford Anything podcast and you're rolling. Like that truly is where you're at. And it's great. Make the most of that.
So thank you, Tim, for the question. And the answer became a lot more philosophical than I had imagined it would be.
Including a long discussion on running.
Right. It was a marathon of an answer.
Even Frank Bright's like, how did I get in that answer? Where did I get it? Where did I come from?
All right. Well, our final question today comes from a 40-year-old with 4 kids named Matthew.
Hi, Paula and Joe. I'm hoping that I can get your insight on how I can manage a move across country. My wife and I are 40 years old with 4 children aged 10 through 3. I've comfortably reached Coast Fi and should be able to walk away from work in about 15 to 20 years without accounting for Social Security income or putting in more to our retirement accounts, although I still contribute. We've decided that our Afford Anything is to move from Florida to the Pacific Northwest. I'm an intensive care nurse and should be able to readily move jobs. As a rough goal, I hope to be making about $120,000 a year after the move. We have $10,000 in cash on hand and should be getting another $7,000 back on our income tax return. I have 3 monthly loan payments, a $500 a month payment at 5% with $20,000 outstanding, a $600 a month payment at 6% with $25,000 outstanding, and a $200 a month payment with $6,000 outstanding at 0.9%. If we can find a home close enough to work, I'll be able to sell my current car and get rid of the $600 debt payment. Our target area is the suburbs of Portland, Oregon. Rentals would likely cost us around $2,500 a month. Purchasing a home that would just meet our family's needs would be around $425,000 for an acceptable place to live, and $500,000 or more for one that we feel would really make everyone in the family happy. I should be able to purchase a home using a VA loan with little down and below market rates of about 6.5%. Real estate websites estimate that our home is worth $400,000 and we owe another $170,000 on our mortgage at 3.5% with $1,400 monthly payments. By those same websites and neighborhood comparables, we estimate that we could rent it out for as much as $2,700 a month. To paraphrase the old saying about when is the best time to invest, the best time for us to have moved was 2019. The second best time for us to move is now. How can I make this happen? Should we rent our current house or sell it outright? We are committed to living at least 2 years at our next location, but if we sell, I'm very concerned that we will be priced out of ever returning to Florida. We very much prefer to own the house that we live in, though if we have to rent for the first year or 2, I would be willing. Thank you for any insight that you have.
Matthew, thank you for the question, and I love the goal. Congrats on having a vision and being committed to pursuing that vision. That is the Afford Anything ethos. So I love what you're doing. To jump right into the answer to your question, I love the idea of holding on to your home in Florida for a couple of reasons. Number one, you're committed to living in Portland, Oregon for at least 2 years. You do not know what you're going to do after 2 years. You may return to Florida. If you want to return to Florida in 2 years' time, it makes sense to hold on to the home just for that reason alone. The transaction cost of buying and selling a piece of real estate is enormous. And the fact that you're going to be away from a given piece of real estate for only 2 years is functionally an extended vacation. You don't sell your home for an extended vacation. So if you're going to go to Portland, spend 2 years there, and then potentially come back, hold on to it so that you don't have to bear the transaction costs of selling this home and buying another one. Now, in addition to that, and obviously I don't think that people as a general rule should base their life decisions around interest rates, but it is true that the home that you have in Florida has a mortgage at a 3.5% interest rate. And that is not an interest rate that you are likely to ever recoup at any point in the near future. Now, I do not, and I'm saying this for the sake of everyone listening, I do not advocate the tail wagging the dog. Do not make major life decisions based on interest rates alone. But Matthew, in your particular case, there's a reasonable likelihood that you are coming back to Florida 2 years from now, regardless. And so holding on to a home that has a 3.5% interest rate makes even more sense. And again, I want to give the disclaimer. If you had left a voicemail that said, we're never, ever, ever, like to paraphrase Taylor Swift, we are never, ever, ever getting back together, right? If you had left a voicemail that said, we are never, ever, ever going back to Florida, and also we hate the idea of being landlords, should we hold on? In that case, yeah, sell the home, get rid of the 3.5% interest rate, right? If you neither want to go back to Florida nor want to be an out-of-state landlord, sure, right? That's where life decisions say this home is no longer a fit. But in your case, that's not your situation. In your case, you may move right back into that home in not that long. 2 years goes by in a flash, right? So in not that long of a time period from now, you may move right back into that home. Don't give it up.
I don't disagree with any of that. I think that the 3.5% interest rate is compelling. I also think, Paula, I want to play a different game, not for him, but for everyone else in the community. Often we'll see people sell this house. And in this particular environment, I think there's a big opportunity you're missing when you do that. We talk in the real estate game about seller financing. This would even be an opportunity. Say that he didn't think he was coming back. I guess it'd be an opportunity. You have to look at how your mortgage is structured. But if you did a seller financing deal with somebody to buy that house and gave them a current interest rate of 7%, 7.5%, if they can't get a conventional loan and they need a loan through you, you can really work. I think that distance, there could be some arbitrage here. So let's say he didn't want to be a landlord and he didn't think he was coming back. I would explore that option, a seller financing option where I will sell it to them. I will use the money you pay me to make my mortgage on the property as I'm selling the property to you on a sort of a land contract kind of basis.
Right.
Once again, you're going to have to work on how does that really work? But I think this is a weird time where a lot of people listening could go down that road if they're making the move and not coming back.
Right. Right. Now, he mentioned that he can also access a VA loan with a small down payment and a below market interest rate. And so that would be a great option for a home in Portland if he were to choose to buy one. But I think it's a great idea to spend, at least for the first 6 months that you're in Portland.
At least.
Rent for the first 6 months. See whether or not you like living in Portland. See if the reality of living there matches up to your expectations or matches up to your imagination, right? Because there's going to be a difference between what you think living in Portland is like versus what it's actually like.
Well, and even if it is great, Paula, how many times have you moved to a town and your expectation of this is the area of town I want to live in,
right? And
then you realize 6 months later, like, oh, wait a minute, there's this other area I really like better that I didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
I love that. I think it's the biggest mistake people make is moving to a new city and just arbitrarily
buying right away. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause that cost, the upfront cost of buying real estate is so high that, it's really difficult to undo. So it's much better to use the flexibility of at least 6 months to rent.
Right. Exactly. So yeah, when you move to Portland, rent for a minimum of 6 months, maybe even a year, get to know the place, have an idea of what you want, and then use the VA loan to buy a place in Portland. And then you can have two places, maintain the place in Florida, have a new place in Portland, collect rental income on whichever one you're not living in at the moment, enjoy below market rate interest rates on both,